当个都去小学的孙中，现在没都都叫帮着马，是叫龙包大不这边个小学这边小东个上早，多见现在的老那老大，马爸马拉就些干包吧。泡沫之吧，就往这公吧，个就老马能接到就是，当那自然当接到，老马老爸老爷就是说，老上有点讲说我老啊，对着东西这边给来做。那个罗就算这边人家老多说，就要让等着人家老多说，让这边这边人家老多说，这边一算这边人家老多说，刚给定钱这边就往高把没把七没把七把没把大没把五没把弱没把。他的都没tun见没，只把你些点把，这把三界忙难界，当把的老乡咋的？真就走个了嘛，就叫各种都叫身上大概就难配的。那个的马当生节就当家乡帮着把生节拉的说，能夸当年被神经他们节就懂得点点拉那没把样的把做不上去节，恐怕人把心里讲头把下。第一季度单被就刚一新的多年是让9年被三把讲究就的审计把当，去年被根据的共同马那如果呢审判差。这了刚审判是去年啊，单被就公把几个把这等你得了他领他必须不干这事。得了，他多就送一只鞋子，那个你去咋个把的？你去咋个把的？对眼咋个当时那个没喜欢的肯定个有把嘞。
I can cultivate motivation thinking that may all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain the state of perfect and complete enlightenment. And so then cultivate such motivation of bodhicitta, thinking that for that purpose I'm listening to the Dharma and thereafter will engage in practice. That is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the Dharma. And the Dharma we are listening to is the Gong Chik, the Buddha's single intent. We are now in the supplement that consists of 47 Vajra statements. And now we are in Vajra statement 29. It says, on the 4 occasions, there is no occasion where samaya is permitted.
他对眼喜欢的对也喜欢的他不忘了是不忘个对的了，搞个有的是。第个是这个当初进南亚呀，南华有嘛的送过有人一定送过。
카라 남바 요마레.
这个当初。
송조 받아오. 자베 담직 송조 받아오.
这个当初他得个人是那当不赢的吧，现在。赢的吧嘛，现在这个当初现就是。现就什么是的，当不赢的吧，现那什么，他这个当初就当得了。往个搞是的，的往100搞是，的呢，可些个大的送有了的，人嘛定下有了吧，的个年龄的，你们这过的什么的送了吧？
往去吧？
往是不搞是，希望搞是的，当时怎么子的，的过的送有了，啊。往什么搞是？往什么搞是？对的，嘛，也不用个，他去个叫话的，过的送么，的他的，他当时，的当时的他。也没叫我他们说的往什么搞是，他那玩意嘛的送有了。嘛，他这个是，这个是他go以前的。Jikten送过给他这个是那玩意嘛，他这样。伊那他这来相当有了，他们。 Nandun tere, da wang simple caps Yayum Jurasi, but get now I maris. Chick down what they do.
The 4 occasions here refers to the 4 empowerments that we receive, starting with the vase empowerment and so on. And so Jikten Sumgön, he is saying that for those 4 empowerments, nowhere is samaya permitted, and what that means is that, so normally people claim that, especially during the 3rd empowerment, one is given a consort, and at that time one also must engage in union with the consort. So there is a yap-yum union that is required in the 3rd empowerment, but Jikten Sumgön says that actually that is something that is not actually permitted.
Then the 2 years Servandala then there is in a touch 2 year pot there is in a touch gona descala capondo jures. Jimsin the Sakana or Revanan Tamjela 2 year book stays in a Sakana or song your mare. Yin yang da the one capsule song do Pawang la super capsule song do tini go the candavelin to your sinanga. One simple capsule tini Tara Dechingi Hijula Jewala tini Yayum Joa Sena Tara Kotoni Jewa Jesurji Sonko Barida. They got that anchi. Tini yang Zalong Les Rone, tini Zadalong la da Rawanda Jitone, Lerong Hiduta, Gewalaya Kandundu do Gorchoba. Tela Lerong Hira, Tikapsu, Yangje, Tara Zabatunga Yin, Yajar, Tini Yayum Jowate, Yangchi Chicho de Vanda, which is Rawasinata, Chicho was song Yore, Tanga, Sanga Yin, Revatanena.
This got Lelong Santi Kabla Kare. Lelong give a chi chopatabo. Kavakona, Lelong the
Lelong,
Lelong Castle.
Lelong la mer.
Kare.
Salon la Rawanta.
Kichati. Give a good chotavore.
Give a la corchocho.
Kare.
That semi sem give tola cacorchocho no, Luna Lu give tola matochi, give toba Jim and Yorova.
The Taba Dumbati, Tungio Maris,
that the solid now what did you there no Jura, Sahanyamela. Sahanyam cups. Then it Nipacha Somso. Then is somebody that are Juba Pondon, Sineta, then it Tundola Subuk, Turjuk Juba Chine, Tundola Subuk, Turjuk Juba, Seneanti, Teseta, young Juba Tony. Tanaji Nawaji, you want
Tundro. Tundro.
That's
animal Tundro.
Terry to know.
Tundro Nashi Chulam?
Do not like you, the there is the Bacajos.
Tundro Kola Kare on Sakomanda. Chilla Labo, Tanangati Magyar.
Jogla.
Then Kanasugo.
To the Yokuba.
Tundro Nanshin Tursuki Juba.
To know I get to Yuba, said they can later. Then Tamsing Baba Capsus, Tam Kankamaya, Baba Kutusu. That day, Tavilayang Samson, now I Yubachi, now I use Senate, young. Tandake Yang Joroton and Yamlin Tandaji Sungo Nayang, Jionke Tini, and Jikten Sumgön Tata Chalam Tatrolam is video, Trolams or Sondora, take a Tata so the Tini. Now I am Marie Sumur.
So, although we say that these are the 4 occasions, it's not always necessarily that, because it is again in different other like commentaries and so on not mentioned exactly to be that, but here it refers to the empowerments, such as the base empowerment and so on. And so what is to be understood here is that during the third empowerment, the wisdom, this awareness of great bliss should arise within one's mind. And for this to arise, then one is instructed to engage in the Yap-Yum union. So there are some who this is generally how it is explained. And this is one occasion, and on a different occasion, if one has attained freedom or a kind of autonomy, mastery over the channels, winds, and drops, then one is able to direct one's mind and body toward virtue. And one is able to direct body and mind toward anything at all. And so even though in general it is said that such a union could constitute transgression of the root vows, but some say that in the secret mantra that sometimes it is permissible that the union is anyways performed. So it seems like it is permissible. So that's the second point. The first one was to direct toward virtue, then the second one is this one, and the third one is then also in the secret mantra, at times, in order to enhance one's practice, one at times is permitted to engage in activity that is called the yogic behavior, which is animal-like. And then the fourth one is sometimes there is a permission to allow one's white and red drops to descend, to fall down. So this is how it is generally said. But you mentioned before that, so for Jikten Sumgön there is two paths. There is the path of attachment or desire and the path of liberation. And Jikten Sumgön actually rejects the path of desire and says that one should only adopt the path of liberation.
Ta ying kare sung ko yore hyuna ndo da nga ji chepa wang ri sun ji tin sung ga sung so tandare was ndo da nga ji chepa wang ri ndo was ta wang de la wang ye yor ba wang ye nang ke wang sun ba de wang cha de yor was mar she wang cha de yor was she wang ge kap so ha de ni ta ya yum ke le ji jo wa la tine tine gawa che ge yor es ti gawa de ta di 탐진 진비 시게 다 제발 요 말이스 디 제발 메바 임바 인자 단디 갑순 단다게 되네 다라디 양용 조르게 냠는데 나완다 나와제다 다테 타제도 고데 반다고 지 이게 요르다 타제도 고데 반다고 지 예요도 되는 달랐다 지틴 송고 순데 단데 tani tsabu ke tamsai yenang ke tamsai jik cha de yor wa so tena yin zang tani de dara du ka yopo kanda yin yang de na wa yo ma ri so.
So what other people claim now, like there's a debate between them and Jikten Sumgön, so they said that but before you Jikten Sumgön said that the difference between sutras and tantras is the empowerment, right? So since you said that, then during an empowerment, one receives 4 levels of empowerments. So when one comes to the third empowerment, which is the wisdom empowerment, then during the wisdom empowerment, in order for this wisdom of bliss to arise, one must perform the union of the Yab and the Yum. And only when this wisdom arises through bliss, one will gain the omniscient, all-knowing wisdom. And so because this wisdom that arises is actually equanimous with the all-knowing wisdom. And so for this reason, they say that it follows that the union of Yab and Yum should be allowed at that occasion. And Jikten Sumgön then would say to that in response that the union constitutes one of the 4 root downfalls, now for an ordained, right? And it is one of those 4 root vows. And for this reason, because it would constitute breaking a root vow, it is this union is not permitted in any of the 4 occasions.
Dan dike yayum wang sumba kapje da de yamyong ke jorwa ki yishi jorwa song yishin da dene pe wang yi siba yinkin je dong ge wang yi si yinkin je zone dene de perna meter pa da ngabda meter pa da naro pa da marpa la so ba ki yichar manda manda yoba dene gang le hyusin barwa de ndu dan de dene once manda dene kandaba 간다르티 이시데 데니 베 이시나리 동지 이시나리 데다데 이시드 줄레 제발라 데니 왕 숨바 히왕 톡보 요레스 데니 히왕 톡 발라 다다라 야병 그 뇽적 그 조와젤란도 데고 요레 숨기 요르 다라 ngarancho mang yosake dara wang kurdia chal ka thone wang kon yorba mato ke ngusatanda jor thone wang te kunkin de ngusato bo yong ko yomare tena insa jitin sungong tene sumba yindo te wang sumba de tanda chal la so ba tanda ka thone nang ro chog yore sen sundung ka thone.
So during the 3rd empowerment, we mentioned that before, so through the union of Yab and Yom, wisdom arises. And so there is some who say that the 3rd empowerment is the illustrative empowerment, and others say it is the ultimate empowerment. We mentioned that before, the masters, Maitrapa and Naropa and Marpa and so on, have all different positions here. But whether it is the illustrative wisdom or the ultimate wisdom in the 3rd empowerment, so in order to develop primordial wisdom, in order for it to really dawn within one's mind, one has to receive the 3rd wisdom empowerment. And in order, so that's what most people say, and in order to receive that empowerment, one must perform the union of the Yab and the Yum. However, how it really happens is that whenever we receive an empowerment, we are actually, during the 3rd empowerment, we are being shown an image, like exactly an image, and that suffices. And we're not actually really engaging in union at any time during the receiving of an empowerment. And that really follows Jikten Sumgön's intent, so that he says that it isn't necessary to have, one shouldn't have an actual concert, but it is enough to just show an illustration of the concert in the form of a picture.
Dandela dene ju tani to na ke long to chendrin sungko yobare kaisana dene tigle de nyam na dewa nyam ro yodu dewa si de zongo yore so dene tigle nyam na dene dewa de ne sami ba ta cha yong yore so ne tanda ko to ni long de ndina ko yorba dene dewa na jin ko jo je la so ba ke 다 조제 단직된 송공 코나바이 다 이공직바 튠보 차도 요리 더 졸람조 진 송로고 요레스.
So regarding this, there's a quote in the Vajra Tantra where it basically says, so if the seminal fluid is lacking, so if one loses one's drop, then there is no bliss. So if one loses one's drop, then there is no place for bliss to abide or to remain. And then later there's another quote by Atisha, and Atisha actually shares the same intent as Jikten Sumgön. So they agree on their view that one should consider the path of liberation as most important.
All right. Tare kang de hyu sim ba yan kan dan de mi ba dang de ni tanda ga thoni check la so ba tanda ga thoni de ni ngo tre cho go yo re sung ba ren da wan sum ba da ma to ngu su da la lin de ta go yo gu ba ta ji de ngi ba yo ma ri song dan de yang zo je 다 getsulong la soba tangje ke 다 nyamni nandu sungkyo ba tena konan de yorwa ma to sangha rang ke lam le hyok de ba yina yang wan so len dan yi marwa
Tenit ani drawati wang sangha ngumma lam chugyo mare.
chim twa da na bo
Ngom nanti.
ana da ha ma da
So it is therefore said that and that during the third empowerment, that the third empowerment can be introduced just through visualization and through words. There is actually no need to actually put this union into practice. And so mainly these instructions here at that time were meant for practitioners who are ordained.
And there it gets along with Domba Yo Pin Tandala Nyamli Ketsegel Lago Yora Kantar gets along Domba Yo Kin La Zovin and the Mipa the Tsekelam the Jingo Yuri some Misason Yuri the Yin the Yang gets along with Domba Yona and Ramina and Zo Churan the Nyamli Ketsegel Lago Yora Nyamli Ketseg de la Malamna then that I will Katoni then you move to Tobaji on Wira. Take Kajuna Jig Lavia, the right channel in Kayore. There Tilly and Dingy Dabo, Chumato ala Tutans, Tilly and Ding Dabo. Pacher and Rubacon in Sayo, Jacksone. Akarchulin Dabos, got a chapon la Tutanso. Akarchulins and the Samachin Samago at that and Nyamichi do Senki or Yanka hit the Sena Sama Sand of Yora. That's just Sama says the Tala goes alame at the Zobatas at the was Tanoj. Sama Susan, the Jimbalas of Tango.
This Goinam did at Gona Yankason, Gone, Tambotere Gola, Hong Sung Della, Gola did Gola, Tambokan Shambachi Sung Sung. Can I tune road this? Relation to
Tigle and drink the boss.
Dick Tandakare.
There Rimati or is Rimatina and Koto Tigle Sansam to sell Pogonis. Rala
Lagarera.
Segel of Mashamna, Malana, and then Sansam the zone of Maris. Zone and
Dina Lama Yangra.
Condo, Rimala Puchan, yes, to get the Wakulin Sao. Dina in Rochi, Yamnik Segel Lagoyore.
Tia Titsatu, Tarong so long Yorava. Tana Tigle, cutting the Yorava. Titsatu.
I got you needed. Go to Japon at the rest. I got you the Julink, Julin is so much in the Mazana. Then the Kaya de Tokoyaya. Then Yanni take Londi or Baraba. Tata de Yanni take him along to go to on Sayo Sama.
Cochulang yin, Lana Kosamasan or
Julin a day. Julin dead in Samasa. Samasa didn't drive a career. Jimba than last one or Zoba. General the sort of Julia Wajamada Conquer cut good season for your reason.
Miss somebody?
Then Masama. Tell him, Sama. Alamaze, you're a mambo in a net tin. Drink him up.
So when we say that this is an instruction that is meant for the ordained, the monks and the nuns, so then it doesn't mean that they cannot, like in a general sense now, cannot engage in this practice, but in order to be really able to engage in such practice of union, one has to reach a certain level of practice. And so it's mainly about that. So assuming that one has not reached this level, one should follow visualization and words. So whether or not one can really engage in this practice depends on where one is actually at in the practice. So there is a danger that when one has not reached this level of practice, that in the context of such a practice, various afflicted thoughts arise. And so in relation to that, there is one quote by Drupal Gunleg, and he said that, so this aforementioned is just like someone who relies on a consort and says, I am holding my drops, I am engaging in this union. But then if they don't actually do that, and so he said somebody who hasn't reached that level and engages in this practice is like someone who says, I am keeping my drops through the practice of union, and in the end produces a child. So this is not supposed to happen if you have reached this level, because you're supposedly able to keep your drops. So if you're making a child, then you have clearly not kept your drops. So he says, so someone will produce a child, and then, or it is like someone who says, I'm practicing Chulen. Chulen is the practice where we don't eat, but we just kind of nourish ourselves from extracting the vital essences of elements and so on. So it is like someone who claims to practice Chulen, but then produces poop.
That the Yamling take a lemala to on the song of Yuri. That Sibon Chassin. Ah, yeah. Tenny that Dorji song, they taste when the summer. Rexarva. They taste when the summer. Tenny that Dorji song, Sunja Badere. Lala Chikjar and Juba Samine, Setatela and Karchimbachi Yore. Tahla Chikjar Juba Samine, and do Karesina Tarachiram Nanke. Kechik Tungji the Chada Yore. Kechik Tungji the Chandu. Touch around to take Gong Chik the Ma, Lobjong Jay by in a Teni Gani. Tani the one por Rabla Choga Jepa Goose on Tani Kechik Tungji to Sotaso, some Karchimo Mahimba or Sonsoa. That then Kechik Tungji the Karchimbo Yimbaji Son Yore. That de Palachin Garda you debanda Oje Hakuaina, te la Gonchik Lobjong Jail, Kalan Kansan, Devanda Oje, Tung Yora, take Jimsin Kansan, Tona Yabote of Batano Chari. Teni Tele last Jobayarina, that in Gardami Patan, Tele Sabran Dona Tenita, or Tele things of Aquachi, Yodebare, Telinto go Yoris.
So it basically has to do with having or not having reached a certain level of practice. And so then we come to Vajra statement 30. It says, to engage instantaneously in the deity is a profound, vital point. So here it is said that, of the different kinds of generation stage, the profound one is the instantaneous arising as the deity. And now you have studied, if you're someone who has studied the Gong Chik, And you might remember a previous statement where it said that if one is of highest mental capacity, one requires the extensive ritual. And so now here, one is actually saying the opposite, saying that it's more profound to practice instantaneously, not extensively. And so it might seem that there is a contradiction here. And actually, if you feel that way, it actually also shows that you have really studied the Gong Chik and remember what has been said and have paid attention. But then you have also go beyond that and discover that there is actually no contradiction. And then here there's actually an even more profound point to be understood.
다 담보 인기 이바데 휴나 다 지름다 데 곰드 담보 공고 요리 손테 디마르와 공고 요리 마곰바데 공고 요리 데네 곰바데야 야 곰퍼톤네 아페 고 요리 페르네 데네 간 렘지 요 서거 요 나와 담지 주마다르 또 발라소바 가토니 데네 야 렘지 다니스메 베톤 또 발라얀 조고 요리 세타 지름 락바니 차발라용 차바니 야데네 조름네 조고 요로 나라송고 요리 데 숭당 데이도 요리스 이네 양 숭당 데이도 요노 양 데게 고알 가레 랑송리스나 타제도 데 고데바 되다 나바 근데 데 고데바 다 고송하래 데네 데라 다세 사히에비는 지틴 송공게 데네 다라 지름 이야난게 데네 다라 깨직 중지데 데네 가르침 보임 바제 송용고 요래
And so others say that when one practices the generation stage or one practices a deity, one has to go in stages and gradually habituate oneself to the practice. And of course, this is a general truth. What we have not habituated to, we must first habituate to. And then once we are habituated, then we have to increase this habituation. And as we increase our practice, eventually one realizes that all the outer appearances, all the objects are illusory. And then as one continues to increase experience, one realizes non-duality. And so in this way, generally, it is that one begins on the coarse level, moves toward the subtle level, and then finally kind of dissolves in the completion stage. And that is generally a correct statement, but the reason why Jikten Sumgön responds to it is because one cannot say that this is always the case. And so because this is not necessarily always the case, Jikten Sumgön clarifies this point by making this statement of saying that of the 4 kinds of generation stages, the most important or profound one is the instantaneous arising as the deity.
단 직팅 송구 그 공반데 휴바이나 안데 답에 차대요레 나초 남진 답에나 응우장아지 그 돈은 냠리 나은데 다테 냠리데 나네 지름 데드나 곰누드 데니 락파르도 나란소 스타상하게 지 베나 팀바냐 야이게타벨 소나 데니 나와 라이랑인 레팀바 마야와 팀바 마냠바 데니 다다 탐제 나그랑인 레팀바 나그랑인 레팀바 마냠바 데니 딘도 탐제 다라데 데니 추주거 랑인 제나레 데타부거 데니 팀바 마냠바테 타 남주 냠니 나데바이나 타트라 냠니 준종 동긴제게스 데니 다 지람 돌아양 삼산다베네 지람 대비인도 딱게직 동지데 간내 첨부 차도 요레스 데니 텔라 타직도 문상아지라서 바그렘지 다라디 알칼 데니 다와니마라서 바코토니아 용고가 된 타지도 니바요 마레소 타지데 테 고고요 마레소 ndare.
So what Jikten Sumgön's perspective here is that so when we, for example, practice the gradual visualization called the 5 actualizations, and then if one applies that to the practice of the 4 applications of mindfulness, then, for example, how one would practice that is one would sustain mindfulness of the nature of all appearances being the deity. And one would sustain mindfulness, one would not lose mindfulness with regard to the nature of all sound being mantra, and one would not lose mindfulness with regard to all arising thoughts in the mind being dharmakaya. And so someone who has habituated to this and who sustains that state, is able to maintain such a state of practice, for them the instantaneous visualization is an important point. Although actually we practice the 5 actualizations in stages. So we visualize the Sanskrit vowels and the consonants and the sun and the moon and so forth, step by step. But the point Jikten Sumgön makes here is that although this is how it is done generally, it is not necessarily always the case.
Jitang jirim shibandala jirim jitimder nga song. Tene nu tamche yaye kansu shibanda la che timder song. Tene lu tamche tene pumbo nga jawa nga tawalo goa. Ndala nang timder song. Teana yin ke tene nga shibanda nga shibanda tene sangwe timder song. Tene sem de yishi jete konani de yishi sem yishi so ha goanda tene de konani ke timder song. Tene teda tamche tene ta yermi ba hibandela tarto donji timder se teta ba je chad yore na jiren ke timder ngapo nda tene namju da jiren shibanda Jikten Sumgön ke yiba tumong mai ba jela timder jiren de dunu yongdrop yin somban de karchen bo shu cha de yore jiren kunda le yin kin mang bo yore yin na yang kunda hiba de ngune mai ba no cha de yore tenin Jikten Sumgön ke jiren de ngune yin ba tar de song de yongdrop song yongdrop de dunu yongdrop cha de yo ba re so.
So generally, it is said that there is 4 levels of interdependence. So seeing the outer universe as the deity's boundless palace is the outer interdependence. Then seeing one's own 5 aggregates as the 5 Buddha families is the inner interdependence. And recognizing sound or speech as mantra is the secret interdependence. And then knowing one's own mind, one's own awareness to be like the ultimate reality or suchness is the suchness like kind of ultimate or suchness interdependence. And so recognizing these 4 kinds of interdependence to be indivisible is the ultimate absolute interdependence. And so regarding the generation stage, also before we mentioned, Jikten Sumgön has also a very unique perspective. He says that the visualization of the deity or generation stage is primordially completely established within one. And that's important here, because there are many who claim that the visualization, the generation stage, is just imputation. However, an imputation would mean that it is not reality. So Jikten Sumgön speaks from the perspective of reality, and therefore says that the visualization or generation stage of the deity is not only completely established within one, but also primordially established.
Tara chiram dun yongro shibande kapso rewa kawacha yorosina. Tene dehe nyumbo de tene yongdin tamje yene dimba je chadu yosun drasung yore. Tene de tawan de yang randong de yindong ni na ge yindong zo dangun zingo yorwa. De yinzang tene dehe nyumbo la yongdin tamje yedin ina tene jinrim dun yongro yimba de ge kare lan rewa kare chag yore shuna jiram ka zo la tamje la tene chin dang pebze la so ba ge jin de ba la na tamjin chin bi yong din din song dorji song na Gong Chik na tra song so de yin zang chin da pebze la so ba tamje gong go yorwa ta gom du jun da tamje dong la mi de ba je log pa da ne gom de ba yin na gun da si 무슨 대바 파다야 봐. 용접스디 코랑은 돈을 저 용수 잡대바 인도 되니 라담 따라 데히님 볼라 데 요바데 요바라 요바다르도 임바라 임바다르도 다 곰도 되니 거 딤바 히바 돈담 딤바 히바데 데 작은 거 여러와 레와 텔 작은 거스.
And so this statement that the generation stage of visualization is primordially and completely established within one. How this relates to here is that, so we have also said that all enlightened qualities are already complete within Buddha nature. And in terms of view, there's the view of asserting self-emptiness or asserting other or extrinsic emptiness. And so here we are speaking about the extrinsic or other emptiness. And so that is what is recognized here. That means that, so the relation between Buddha nature that possesses all enlightened qualities and the statement that the generation stage is primordially and completely established within one is that when we visualize a deity, and we visualize the deity with all its major and minor marks, the various attributes of the deity. And also in one Vajra statement, it says that the deity, the qualities of the deity are represented by the major and the minor marks. So we visualize the deity in this way. And the way we visualize it actually corresponds to how things really are in reality. If they would not, then the visualization that we perform would be an imputation, meaning that basically concept labels that we create in our mind. And if it is a concept label, then it is not reality. But the statement saying that the generation stage is primordially and completely established shows that it actually corresponds to reality. So therefore, when we practice the deity, we should visualize or meditate on the deity, recognizing that all of these qualities are already complete within one, and that the deity is actually oneself. And so acknowledging what actually is the way to practice the deity. And this way of practicing corresponds to the ultimate reality. And so this is the connection here.
다 dorji song sumje sokjik bade re la ne timder choj trba yin timder choj trba hibar gu song timder choj trba hibar gu song tan de la de kap so tambo yin ki ba de hin hina tene de kwa le la polong na pink yore some things ying said the land drop, Tanga to la drop your la drum, the sun drop gonna, Karikan drop go your sinner. That la drop and him by your is a land druzilla. Him by your benanke, Tenin him bought and never him boss the him back, him by your and also them chotos and you are him bought and yen sinner. The Vajra to summon yorda. That thing about the Tranka de son, and any Tranka de Catundra Land son, that and I yiggoris, yink, the yinkiza. Then Jikten Sungo get the tinder solid by Hibagus, Langone, Drogona, Himpa Kadang Zamke, then a land of Semarisone.
Then we come to Vajra statement 31. So first, what other people claim, because this will help us understand the meaning. So it says, other people claim that to stabilize the stage of cultivation, the chief thing is the number of recitations. So to stabilize the stage of cultivation means that in order to accomplish the deity, they say that in order to accomplish the deity, one has to recite the deity's mantra. So the number of recitations is most important. And for the mantra, we have the essence mantra and the quintessence mantra, like in the Chakosamvara or Vajrakilaya practices and so on. And so they say that, so for each of the practices, there is a certain number of mantras to be accumulated, and they say that once you have completed the accumulation of those mantras, then you have accomplished the deity. And Jikten Sumgön says that this is not actually the case. One must know how to accomplish the deity through the gathering of dependent origination. So Jikten Sumgön is saying that in order to actually accomplish the deity, it is not sufficient to just complete the number of mantra recitations.
Then they got Timder Choba Sendu, Yetzatoni, Dinsom Tawa, Dechi Goyores, Dinsom de Carrere, Hipa the Himedi, Tro the Tromedi, Simba the Simedins, and Dinsom, then around Soke, a circle on the Sen, a Jinkola de Tango Yores. Nang look down one the Sen, and around to Luland, Dinsom the Tango Yore. Hiro Tambar Jatsandu, that Dinsom the Tangtang Bando Chago Yorela, the Changdu Yoris. That day the Changdu Yoba de Hakoala, that Yamlink Tony, Naranzo Nimbala Tong Bagasu, Teni, Yaman Nimbachibo, Patangsa deva Zamdang, Yaman and Nimbal to do Teni, Keja here deva, de Dava Tony, Yongo Yomari, Choga Yamlin Sidu, Sumare. Choga Yamlin Sindu, Nimbala to the Lakbar de, Teni Gomjane, that Nimpa Dang Yurdo, Nipar to Gomja to Goyore. Nimpa Senjute, La, the Chick, Dendawaji, that La de Yachi, La. Jindewa Sisin Dawaji, Patanier Donje Dawaji. Then it Tanier Dondi Takarigur, Simtoni, Tazo Tango Yorba. Mason Jikti Murton, son of Tawanache, Kanin Bond over here, same day in the night, Mina, then Yichi Mataya down, Pat Robotani Bochatoko Yomare. Then it same tone, Jikili Ichino Chimbo do Dena, then it Kaduna roboti, Zubo the tiring poor Gasoluna. Then each the tiny bolo do, then same the chick, same nipo the chick now chad yore. They in the around of Lala, Nimba, Dang, Chupa, and Pumambo Zena Yang, Sosa and Goyori Yabori there, Tala 10 years huge tongue Goyori, Lapardo Tahiganga, Darati, Kitchik Trunchi Lasso, but and Ragaton we're gonna lower the Ladan, some year meet and rogo top goyori days, that the Sotamjela, that dire, Natsoke, Tane, Gino Gomje the Cartier de Yores.
So this gathering of dependent origination refers to the mandala of the 3 seeds being complete within one. So those three seeds are the first seed is the male and the female Buddhas. The second seed, the male and the female bodhisattvas, and the third seed, the male and the female wrathful ones. So in an outer representation of a mandala, for example, these three seeds must be complete. But then they are also actually complete within one's own body, because we have said that the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities are complete within one's body. And so therefore, since the three seeds deities are included within them, the three seeds mandala is also complete within one's body. And so to understand, to realize that, one practices the deity and one recites the mantra. And so then, so this gathering of dependent origination is that even though one recites the mantra, one just recites the mantra, then during that time, one can either completely focus on that, or one might start talking about other things to someone and so on. And so to accomplish the deity through this certain number of mantra recitations, it's also necessary that one remains in a state of meditation for the entire time of mantra recitation. Because this is the way, it is really through the mind that we come closer to the deity. So to accomplish the deity and to establish a connection to the deity, what must happen is an approach of the mind. So it is through the mind that we come closer, and for this reason we visualize the deity and recite the mantra. But mainly, so we have to be close to someone in the mind, and this also is how it works in the world. For example, if you speak very nice to someone, if you're very friendly, but in your mind you actually don't deeply trust that person, then you will not ever be a very close friend of that person. Because even though your speech may reflect friendship, but your mind doesn't trust, so you're not close to that person in your mind. So to be close to someone has to do with being close in the mind and not in the speech. So not the recitation, but the trust that you have in the mind. So just like trusting a friend from your heart, naturally when you trust them, even if your bodies are far away, even if you're somewhere else, your trust in each other keeps you connected and be very close, like of one mind actually. And so now this is, of course, naturally, generally, it is good to practice all the aspects of the deity, like the visualization and the mantra recitation and making offerings and so on. So that is an accumulation of merit, and that's very good. But then to actually connect to the deity, we do that through the mind. And so for this reason, as you mentioned before also, one instantly arises as the deity for that reason, because instantly the deity comes to mind and one merges one's own mind with the mind of the deity. So the point that is important here is that, so what's more important than numbers of recitations is the meditation, the visualization of the generation stage.
Ta namjun te songo yore chu drupa we jang drupsar zo song zo jimchin kare re sena chu drumnen drop go yorwa la drumnen drop go yorwa la drumne drup chadu kable jap chadu tin rebe nyong go yor rebe te top ra go yor ngarang zu te chun jiktin kare na ji bare te yongwar sibala ta kare go yore ta ji ni ban do ringbo xiu ji dang de wa zang ke la den drop yo mar ta de nge la ho yo mar jiktin sung go ta lam do zhang zam zha ba ke yin ke drop an do de te ta mari son tan de ndu ta la de drop sibala ta ni ba dang go yore te da nyam de la ji go yore is ta ji ba de la ne tim der ji chok pen drop tim der kare tim der chok de yore se du tang ngarang zu pen ngun sang nga ji ji go ne ji nem de so chok gong du ta dang bo ale da wa te ka le nyama te da ba ji ji tini te ka la ta la ge samsin tini samsin ge de song tini song de la ta u zo zho de ji ne tini la go yong so zo bar ser ji yong ba dan de timde ji chokpa hi ba de ngarang zo namju ji de dere tenirem ji yong du ta pombo sanje nga dani re pombo sanje nga dani indu teni pombo sanje nga dani ser du kare re pombo nga de jawa re nga ris pombo nga jawa re nga indu pombo nga jawa re nga de kanda cha de yuresina namshi ji pombo nde maju ba tebyin hi ba maju ba cha de yure 대가 나 인거 초보 풍보인데 렌친 중딩 차도 요리 뇌시지 풍보인데 나완타의 차도 요리 뇌시지 풍보데 동요 잡아 차도 요리 대 남시지 풍보인데 나버난제 뇌시 풍보데 동요 잡아
남시 담보는
남시데
미교반서
남시 담보 라서 담보데 족족로
담보데 르레 미교바데 르레
족부모 족 초반데 힌두지 남시지 말에
족 미교바라
족 미교바라 되니 넘버 히바데 넘버 난제스
It is also said that it's more important to know how to practice than to practice at all. So whatever we practice, the Dharma or the Deity, we need to not just practice, but also we need to know how to practice it properly. Because practice also actually implies some kind of an effort that we put in. So we worked, like just in the world, we work towards something and then we reap the fruits from our hard work. So it's the same in the world. So therefore, simply just some mantra recitations alone, according to Jikten Sumgön, the recitations alone will not lead to the accomplishment of the Deity. But of course, we still have to recite the mantra, but that's not the only thing that will lead to accomplishing the Deity. Together with the mantra recitation, we need to practice the visualization. And so here, this gathering of dependent origination, what dependent origination is being gathered. So when we practice, for example, the visualization of the 5 actualizations, so we have 5 steps of visualization. It begins with the Sanskrit vowels, and from the Sanskrit vowels appears a moon disk, and then from the Sanskrit consonants appears a sun disk, and then on top of moon and sun appears the implement of the Deity, and then the implement becomes the seed syllable, and then light rays radiate from it and gather back, and then the seed then transforms into the complete form of the Deity. So that's how we usually visualize in stages. And so in that context, we say that when the Deity then fully appears, the Deity, or 5 aggregates, are the embodiment of the 5 Buddha families. And how they are the embodiments is that the aggregate of form is the Buddha Akshobhya. The aggregate of feelings is the Buddha Ratnasambhava. The aggregate of perception is the Buddha Amitabha. The aggregate of karmic formation is the Buddha Amoghasiddhi. And the aggregate of consciousness is the Buddha Vairochana.
Ta tene jungwa ye de yom ye se. Ten jungwa ye yom ye imbala ngarang zubo da kare ten rewa yori dringerwa. Zubo da kare rewa yor ta hi pungbo nga jawa nga sen de pungbo se wande pena zokju pungbo se du mambo je tun du yabatela pungbo la ko yore. Ta nansu se yewa se ndu sha yore, cha yore, zhu yore, wog yore. Ta den jungwa ye dan der, jungwa ye bonde teni yom ye dan der wa ne. Tanda cha de der wa korang ko tim der la go ya der der wa tanda ba cha yo de yore. Cha de yo de ta gom go yore. Gom de Ta be ngaran zo sai kam de sanje ji ma yom sanje ji ma. Teni choi kam de tara yom mama ga. Wok de tara wok se long kam de tamsek roma. Teni drug kam de kukar mo se tara de. Ta de we indu ngara drug se ba de tara me re ngak tara de tang so. De indu tamba jik de so ya.
And then the four elements that comprise our body are the four female Buddhas. And so how they're connected to our body is that, so first of all, the aggregates are connected to the elements. So aggregate, for example, the aggregate of form, but this term aggregate implies the coming together of many different parts. So the union of many different parts. For example, in the aggregate of form, we have flesh, blood, heat, breath, and so on. So these are related to the four elements. And the four elements by nature are the four consorts. And so as dependent origination, gathering dependent origination, that means that this has to be practiced, this recognition. And so how the four consorts relate to the four elements, the earth element is by nature the Dakini Buddha Lochana. The water element is the Dakini Mamaki. And the wind element is then the Dakini Samayatara. And the fire element is the Dakini, the white clad Dakini.
Then the Danjua Yadang around the Bena Sha Sai come, Chad Yorwa, Cha Choi come, Drew May come, a long walk long come, Chad Yore. And then the Namjung around the Setups in Donya Yorwa, Din and the Pe, the Sokotone, Hipta Yoring, Himanga, the so. Soba zon do pan don do ya bo kwa mlo pan don do le ma to ti jini ra pe cha ta de pe cha so te cha de a ngi man don do ju so de na teng sa bo yo re sam sang ro chen zhe go de de ni wa yan wa ye ko rang ge nang la yang wa ye ge ju de ni che de ni ju tam je de ni zhe da ra de hla ge sin la da de so lo tin nyam de der ne teni churda yong ba na ji rin do ta so ge ji nan dong de ha ko bu to ne teni ji dong ji na dong pa de la dong bu ga so ya zhua yo de ba pin to yo de ba de ge sem la jing zhua dong ta de ba teni ran yin ge gom ma cha de yo ba de so ge ji ga sa ji de ne pin to chen bo yo de ba ji rin do ne ngi ma da dong sa bon dong de Nando cha ma ko de samsa kable khan doni mo dra cha ro ya ro ma do ke hira yong tho ma do te ra yin za dara Jikten song go tin der chole de ba hibar gu song je de ti chek de so la sang da de da ngene ta ne a che do ba da nyam de la so so ge sem ge ji ram de la zo ji go de ne ha ko to yo res.
So for the four elements, one's flesh, for example, is the earth element, and one's blood is the water element, and the body heat is the fire element, and one's breath is the wind element. And actually, in this, like the elements are described in this way in practices like long life, longevity practices. They go into much detail of how we summon, draw in the vital essences of all these elements. So in the past, when I was young, we did all of these recitations, like the long life recitations and so on. And at that time, we were just reciting those scriptures, but not really reflecting or understanding their meaning. And so later, when I again came across these practices, after having understood the meaning, I realized that actually that's quite profound, something that I didn't understand before. So in the long life practice, for example, it describes how we are drawing in the vital essences of the 4 elements and how these become merged with the blessings of the deities, which then are summoned, and we receive those powers and qualities. And so then I really felt that if one really understands the meaning of what one is actually reciting, then one will feel much more enthusiastic about one's practice, and also, of course, there will be more benefit from doing the practice, because then the practice can actually transform one's mind, and one will habituate to the practice. But before I ever knew the actual meaning of those texts that we were reciting, it sometimes did happen that after a lot of recitations, one would just get very tired, and I wouldn't want to continue to recite. And so this is why this verse here is important. One must know how to accomplish the deity through the gathering of dependent origination. So when one really understands the meaning of this, then later when one actually does some recitations, then one also recites the texts with the knowledge that one must, for example, in the visualization that one recites, what's really important is the mind.
Chedan de choa de sondong do ga lobjong ji ji ke yori yin ya lobjong ji dang ro ha ko mi sa ro so so ko lobchin de ji bo san ta de ni yik che de la san no ta de ni lo le ya de san no ta de ma do ge ji nam ju so so gun dong je drub je de so to la san no yang dong drub de la yang san no de ma dang dra chan ro de ko de ji dang ro je ji dang ro hi sa ma ro
Da chung men za aba chung chung
nga ta chung gặp te pe cha lobjong ji he yore
tang ha ko re ya ina yang so la ge kerang la ge
ngang la tem se nge ti gặp so lobjong ji he yore is ta te ndu te yordu ki ba te ni ta di ho de darong de ndo te ni mexo nang ki chim chi si ta ngarang so la me na ji lu yi sin do ta de so tam je te ni ka re se na do so tam je simba je si nang khu nim bo sai nim bo jin re ze dripa nam ser jamba yang jamba kun de zambo la so ba ke janchu samba je si ta nga so jing khol de sam ta na de jing khol ke dang bo ye de 샬로 ji nubzang shi sanshar ji tada so yala tangbo semba yego
tana sum shalo nubsang changshar
샬로 ro lo na ro nubzang ro sanshar ro 샬로 ni pala karla re 샬로 pala
mare karang sum lab song nga karang je zana song
ye go da te tambo nang jingkor nang lo la simba ye yo ro
tambo
tani 샬로 ta nang ko ning bo ning go zong ro ma 샬로 pala je lono pala je lono tani lono ba nubzang ro nubzang pala je san sha pala je
tambo je dan zara
tambo nang ge ye teni slow la te yang ye yore te ye de la teni yang de slow ge yang de ta jingko la se nang yore ba te ndu yang de la teni dara nge kare la cha dor ji la sai
te sai ningbo namke ningbo sai ningbo chen reze tripa nam sal den so nang la sa ra
te so nang
ti cha tu jampe yang champa
chadur
o chik che song
jamba
champa ki che do
kunzang
chato da zen song ma song
chan dor ji
da zen song ma song ti khaba do sambo ni ba
te slow la yore
re mare champa
sanshar la
mare champa yang ki chela re champa ki chela re
jamba yang ji la
sambo champa yang teni sana to cha teni Champara. Dinara.
That Koram.
Korundira. Dini young Charlo no dinner. Chipara.
Menda Chinkorkes.
In a Charlo no Chipara.
That dog.
No, in the past, when I was when we were just kind of learning about the different rituals and practices, so mainly what I was focusing on at that time, of course, I did learn something and I did study, but often what we were thinking about is more the next exam and passing the next exam and just memorizing, because we had to memorize things. But we were not actually thinking about the meaning of it and accomplishing the meaning of that. So anyways, that's the side note. And now back to the body, the aggregates. So we talked about the elements, and then there are the sense bases. There is the inner, the sense base of the eyes and the nose and the ears and so on. And these are the 8 bodhisattvas and bodhisattvas, so the male and female bodhisattvas. So the 8 male bodhisattvas are the bodhisattva sky essence, bodhisattva earth essence, Chenrezig, then the bodhisattva that is free of all obscurations, or the immaculate one, and then Manjushri, and Vajrapani, and Maitreya, and Samantabhadra. And when we visualize a mandala, then they are situated on the outer and inner periphery of the mandala. So in the inner level of the mandala are the first 4 bodhisattvas. So that would be sky essence is in the southeastern direction. Earth essence bodhisattva is in the southwestern direction. Chenrezig is in the northwestern direction, and the immaculate bodhisattva is in the northeastern direction. And then on the inner level, the outer level, that's the inner level. And on the outer level are the other 4 bodhisattvas, which is, so then you have Manjushri in the east, southeast, and Vajrapani in the southwest, and Maitreya in the northwest, and Samantabhadra in the northeast.
Oh, that the order la Karayores not mixo nanga jimchis, Zuxo che jimchis, Zugda, Rorixas and Mambojido. Then the so time che jimchis. That che jimchi la young sema je segure. The sema je hibanda young dara chok tone the mendarku tang tony chak yorba. Yina ngaran zu za kam dan zu bu kam na da dang jigba cha de yore. De endu da gada cha de yore sina deni sha de shalo ni go zong de deni gimmo ma tingwa ma le ma gimmo ma tingwa ma le ma karma se de yang na lo go cho yala yo de res.
So then so these were the inner sense spaces, and then the outer sense spaces, which are the sense objects, the form, sound, smell, and so on. These are the 8 female bodhisattvas. And so now here we are explaining it from the perspective of how the mandala is made up. But also they are all complete within our own bodies, the channels and our subtle elements and so on. But in terms of the mandala now, again, starting from the southeastern direction, the first 4 female bodhisattvas are the charming goddess, the goddess of garlands, the goddess of song, and the goddess of dance.
Tene tege cho tege sholo la yang dara sema ye yo banda dare meto ma dupu ma nangsar ma chicha mas.
So these first four goddesses are on the inner level, and then the other next four female bodhisattvas are on the outer level. And these are the goddess of flowers, the goddess of incense, the goddess of light, lamps, and the goddess of fragrances.
Da di o de teni ngarang zu tsek do zubo la tsikchin je si yo ba re pumo ni da zhumo ni la so ba ge tsikchin je da teni la cho ye dang cho mo yes de cho ye da je dang de xin je xi这现在是当真现在是当真对症解哇但呢多不起来呀的我的Sanskrit呢这都技术全多不起全起全的也嘞但呢传播也呢大南京啊是大班Vajra呀都是呢学很多人加州嘛这嘛小爸嘛的这加州这个小巴这个人，
小巴
加州嘛，这个嘛小巴嘛，南京啊做杂红包一个哇，
小巴当直播吧，直播是吧？
直播嘛，那么上，
对对，
加州嘛，这个小话嘛，加州，这个加州这个小巴，
出国呀，什么的，
那得了什么意思？
Then in our body we have the eight major joints, like our knees and elbows and so on. And all the 8 major joints in our body are the 4 male wrathful ones and the 4 female wrathful ones. So the 4 male wrathful ones are Yamantaka, Hayagriva, Amrita Kundali, and Mahabala. And then the female wrathful ones are, and that's also in our Vajrakilaya practice, are the goddess of iron shackles, the goddess with a bell, the goddess with a lasso, and can't think of the 4th one.
他的也加州这个小巴这个老子啊，这个你老不懂，他带了说吧，跟老母也有人干的，但呢，他的也的有的全都抽也的抽么也是之前也是办的，查的有把的哇，但呢他대외도 나랑서 팀들 세반데 다 주부가나 때다고 그 라초도 용수 줘봐 요 대바래 주부가나 때 라초 용수 줘봐 요 대반데 되니 나랑서 그 때다부 돈은 야지 용도 다 가르핑 그 요레스나 되니 렘 징나랑서 지름 시바데게 제시 치시 Parsi se da de ta siba tam ji jang ro yo res jine ya la so ba tam ji jang ne de wen du jirim siba de jonzi cha de yo re jonzi si de ngin song ke ta ne da wo da sa tam ji jong ro yo du de ne ta ba la ya ran yin de sunu ta ba la ya ye kang Nanju la da lamran yin servande. That there the Virginian Lumi Patine, David Tinia, the younger Yoris.
The 8 main joints in our body are the 8 male and female wrathful ones, and though it says interdependence, they also in the dependency is that they also are complete within our own body. So all of these deities are within our own body. And so in general, what's the benefit of practicing the generation stage? And the benefit is that through the generation stage, the generation stage is a purification where we purify the existence of birth and of death and the bardo. And we train in the 4 kinds of generation stage and thereby purify the 4 ways of taking birth. So the generation stage purifies, and what it purifies really are the abodes of the 3 lower realms. And so once one becomes purified through the generation stage, then the entire outer universe appears as a boundless palace of the deity, and all the inner sentient beings appear naturally as gods and goddesses.
That there in the Jakjuma.
The fourth goddess is the goddess with the hook.
Oh yeah. That in the Narans Zubola data Lazo Yobandela Tenetrachi ne Flata Ransan Yemi the Rogona Tene Kokom Tatada Nabandamaratone. Jikten or Mambo Huge some Sibare. Chorang oh that the Mang Tason Sam to Gandela. Pacher Tanget Churang to Sem Neha Kogomarite. That the Suba Jikten and Origurite. Oh, Latin Mambo going a goblin, though some logic going a la goblet, Dindi, you the Patano, Chang, your Gainsena. Sladaran sent me the Sitabaina. La Mambo gona yang, Relachi gomna, this and Chepa made the Wataji, Chakuyorwa. Deni in a young till a danga yore. La J gomne, Mipati and Dogan della. Deni Semla Aranzo Doi Capsuvena, Tara Hine Gonde, the Simoni down. Choguni sena Hinek Parche Yorwa, Parche Yore. Jiram Gomda Det Jigbarwa. Then the Samsan Simok Nabata, Nyo Yum Nabata on the Ladeke, Sir Lad Sibo and Hermataba, the Rayong the Bacapsa, Nipper the Digger La Hipta the Gongo Yore. Did you send the go Dexagil Deke Yomare, Deke Yomare, La Colored, send the nets in La Pork, Jiniam the Senenare, Mojiniam the Senenare. La po yora, tro yam the nenari, tromoniam the nenari, zolaniam the nenari, dincorniam the nenari, jolaniam the same the day the yore, they can take the yore, they in some, they remji, tapumonga, javanga, the salagom, dene, oh, the sembaje, the semajela, so but jimchi, the zo, near remji gom. Young times are they gone, the Denis the gom jet the tongue mang, the tiltin, young sem trogu the hukcher and rone. This same the solo party, Horchocho, Loje, Drajitana, then a Horchocho, Semero, and the Dachano, Troaje, the Troa the Jim Bogabso, died, and so to Hikahakor, saying, then the answer on the Tarazo, Zola, Davatella, Jigla, Mipatene, the Rajin, that Candala, answer ye meter, Jorgote, Major Papa, Gongo Yore, then the Hinga Tranca, the young some the Tranca de Song Yuri, that Tranca Sunyan de Kayel, that tragic, that tragic danary, but tragic dan Latin drop song Yuri, done the Tranca de Carcintina Mari, Sejo Marin, the Carche the Meche, the China Mipa de Gomne, Tini Hak Tranca de Tes and Diona, Tini mikpa te tang chu trangka daya teni ke, tini mikpa ka tsegi de zinyo go yore, pero chuchu tabi chado yo, chuchu. Nga tso tsam tsam gom jadi chuchu la mikpa ta na tajo madawa tini, mek zumdab tela halam trangka sabi, yang tsam tso nga rang tsu tu zubo ka tsa par na par tsa trangka tsa la tsegi yo na tini nga tso gom jaga yoro.
Chuchu mata na?
Chuchu ta de nang sem yengro do. Gom Chik ja chuchu kasir dat pata de yang sem yengro. Teni te pate se parsa to lo lakba yan de yo ko teni nga ko lang ro de tang gom te kase ne thi so ha ko ra. Ti ta raw je.
Chugu ina sana gom khacha ne to gira ha ko da.
Te ha ko.
Khana sa ko re.
Chugu
ina sana teni ti parsa ti ha ko ra. Teni gom yeme khana ha ko.
Tanga gom me pa chikla pha me pa chikla te no de no ra. Ti khala te bin du sem me pa chikla te de na te ha ko ra. Te ha ko ra. Ha mo le hon do ba ra. Te ha ko tu tini ti trangka ta go ma ra che ni som za go ma de. Tini halam sa ko chu ba ji ta go tu go ra za. Halam sa che ki chen jin je no. Chen jin je no. Te ndo re ta.
Teni dinner sena teni anda de chi go ra.
Je ni som za go yo ma ra. Za go ma ra.
Je shi khana song go re. Je shi khana song go re teni.
Te halam sa ha ko go ra ji.
Khacha da do re.
Nga rang zu la ka nyama kya de ta nyama de ma ma zo ka de me ka ta go ma ra. Nga rang ni te la ju bo de de ta nyama de ka se sa de halam ha ko de ina ta je ta ta lap to go ma re de halam sa ha ko ra. Ti na yi yin ba trang ka te se da ti par de chi nam to gom de de ni te ha ko ra ba ko. Ja ja jan ma ho na.
So there's a different. No, when we practice the deity, we visualize the form of the deity. We practice until we merge our mind with the deity's mind, and then until that point, there is many different ways that we can practice. And so, one might think that it's just too much to visualize, and so I'm not sure if you're really thinking in this way, because I don't know your mind, but in any case, now if that is what you think, that is, if there's all the visualizations are so much and it's too much and difficult, then it will also be difficult to visualize or just focus on one single part of the deity. And it's because the mind doesn't stay still. And so for this is the reason why we cannot merge our mind with the deity then. And so if you recognize that it's all the same, then it makes no difference to you whether or not there's much to be visualized or not. And so for example, when we practice meditation according to shamatha, according to the sutra path, where we practice shamatha, this actually also relates to the visualization of the deity. So there's basically in shamatha, there's basically 4 obstacles to our meditation, and that is like a lack of clarity, a thinking mind, and then kind of dullness. And then the other 2 are being agitated and restless. And so when the mind loses clarity, you kind of become like sluggish and unmotivated, and then that's similar to deity practice. It happens then that the visualization becomes unclear. And when it becomes unclear, then you have to focus more on the details of the deity. So in greater detail, you have to focus on the deity and visualize. And in that case, even if the mind does not stay with one particular aspect of the deity, that's fine. So the deity, the mind can stay with the male deities or female deities, or the wrathful and peaceful and so on, or the male and the female wrathful ones and so on, or with the retinue. So as you mentioned, the 5 Dhyani Buddhas are the 5 aggregates, and then the 8 bodhisattvas and bodhisattvas are our sense bases and so on. So then we can focus on any one of them when the mind is thinking, but losing clarity. But then when the mind becomes restless due to so much meditation and visualization, the mind becomes agitated, then you also can also let that be. And when the mind becomes agitated, then apply mindfulness and instantly recognize that the mind has wandered off, and bring the mind back to the visualization of the main deity. And so then you practice in this way until you merge your mind indivisibly with the deity. And so regarding the numbers of mantra recitations, so some actually require the accumulation of a certain number of mantras, like certain tens and thousands or hundreds and thousands and so on. And they say that if you recite that many mantras, then you accomplish the deity. So of course, we are not saying that the number of mantras is not important, but while one recites this number of mantras, one must also stay in meditation on the visualization of the deity. And then along with that, one recites the mantra. And so now in terms of keeping track or kind of how many mantras one has accumulated, what is actually the main thing one should keep track of is one's visualization, and not the number of recitations. Also, in terms of time, we don't have to keep track of the precise time, because when we start watching, like looking at the time, at the watch, at the clock, then again the mind becomes distracted. So one thing we can do as like a kind of like as to keep track or to measure the time that we spend in meditation and recitation is we can keep our fingers on our wrists to observe the pulse, so we can feel the pulse. And even though we are not counting the pulse, so we don't know exactly how often it pulsates in terms of how much time has passed, but we can have like an overall idea of how much time has passed by just keeping our fingers on our pulse. It's just like when the sun is like moving throughout the day. We don't have to always observe it to know exactly what time it is. And when we look at it, and we can have like an overall idea of what time it is. It's kind of similar to that when we recite the mantra together with the visualization.
Thank you very much. Zonam de damje zebanye toanye bedana bazine jiga nanja balon roba seban zolan roba jo. May every being aligned with the disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed.